Can you imagine, like, trying to celebrate Christmas while, bombs are raining down all around you?
Oh, wow.
That was the reality for people in Hanoi
Yeah,
in 1972 during Operation Linebacker 2.
right.
Um, a controversial bombing campaign that remains a hotly debated chapter in the Vietnam War.
Mm,
We're going to take a deep dive into this pivotal moment,
okay.
examining firsthand accounts, military strategies,
All right.
and the impact on both sides of the conflict.
It's a story of political pressure,
Yeah,
military might, and human resilience.
right.
We'll uncover the motivations behind President Nixon's decision to escalate the war despite peace talks
Okay.
and explore the lasting consequences of this 11-day bombing campaign.
So let's unpack this,
Yeah.
starting with the scene on the ground.
Okay.
Imagine you're in Hanoi
Right.
trying to celebrate Christmas with your family.
Okay.
The air raid sirens blare, and you rush to a shelter,
Mm-hmm.
the ground shaking as bombs explode nearby.
Wow.
This was a nightly occurrence during Operation Linebacker 2.
And while families huddled in fear below, high above them, American B-52 bombers were flying into heavily defended airspace.
Yeah.
It was a dangerous mission.
Yeah.
And we have a firsthand account from one of those pilots, Captain Bob Surton,
Right.
who describes the tension, the fear, and the harrowing moment. His B-52 was hit by a missile.
His story is incredible.
Yeah.
He talks about flying a predictable route,
Right.
knowing that the North Vietnamese could anticipate his every move.
Mm-hmm.
There was a sense of inevitability,
Yeah.
like they were sitting ducks.
And that's a key point here.
Yeah.
The initial U.S. strategy relied on these predictable bombing routes, which,
Mhm.
as Captain Surton's experience shows, made the B-52s incredibly vulnerable to North Vietnamese air defenses.
So what was going through Nixon's mind?
Well,
He had just won re-election,
right.
promising peace with honor in Vietnam,
Mm-hmm.
yet here he was,
Yeah.
escalating the war just weeks later.
Nixon felt immense pressure.
Really?
The peace talks had stalled, and he was determined to force the North Vietnamese back to the negotiating table
Right.
on terms favorable to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
He believed that a massive show of force targeting key areas like Hanoi
Right.
would achieve that goal.
But the North Vietnamese weren't just going to roll over.
No.
They had their own determination, their own pride, and they were fighting for their homeland.
Absolutely.
And leading the defense of Hanoi was
Yeah.
Dinh Van,
Yes.
an air defense commander who played a key role in countering the American air raids.
Dinh Van commanded the 77th Battalion,
Okay.
responsible for protecting Hanoi from those very B-52 raids.
Yeah.
He knew the Americans had superior technology,
Right.
but he also knew they had weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
He and his men were incredibly resourceful,
Wow.
exploiting gaps in U.S. jamming technology to target the B-52s.
It's amazing to think about the pressure he must have felt,
Yeah.
facing down the most powerful military in the world with limited resources but unwavering determination.
What's fascinating here is how both Captain Surton and Dinh Van represent the human faces of this conflict.
Right.
One man piloting a bomber,
Mm-hmm.
trying to survive a mission he had doubts about,
Right.
and another man
Yeah.
commanding a battalion, determined to defend his country against all odds.
Yeah.
Um,
That's incredible.
it is.
To think-
It's a powerful story.
Yeah.
And we're just getting started.
So let's dive a little bit here then into both of these guys.
All right. And both men were acutely aware of the human cost of this conflict.
Yeah.
Surton carried the weight of releasing his bombs,
Right?
not knowing where they would land,
Yeah.
while Van witnessed the devastation inflicted upon his city and his people.
You know, when we think about the Vietnam War,
Right.
we often picture jungles and guerrilla warfare.
Mm-hmm.
But Operation Linebacker 2 was a different kind of battle,
Yeah.
fought in the skies above major cities.
It was a clash of ideologies and technologies.
Yeah.
The U.S. Air Force,
Yeah.
with its advanced bombers and sophisticated electronic warfare systems,
Mhm.
pitted against a determined North Vietnamese defense force,
Right.
armed with Soviet-made missiles and sheer willpower.
And it wasn't just a military clash.
No,
The bombing campaign had a profound impact on public opinion back home in the United States.
absolutely.
Imagine turning on your TV
Right.
and seeing images of Hanoi engulfed in flames just days before Christmas.
The American public,
Yeah.
already weary from years of war,
Right.
was outraged.
Yeah.
Protests erupted across the country,
Wow.
with people questioning the morality and effectiveness of the bombing campaign.
Mhm.
Even some of Nixon's own allies began to voice their dissent.
So you have this intense military campaign, happening alongside a growing anti-war movement.
Well,
What does that tell us about the political climate at the time?
It highlights the deep divisions within American society
Yeah.
and the growing pressure on Nixon to find a way out of the Vietnam quagmire. He was caught between his desire to project strength and his promise to bring the war to an end.
And all of this is happening while Dean Van and his men are desperately trying to defend their city from these massive B-52 raids.
Right.
What can you tell us about their strategies and their successes?
The North Vietnamese were incredibly resourceful.
Yeah.
They knew they couldn't match the U.S. Air Force plane for plane,
Right.
so they focused on exploiting weaknesses.
Oh.
They moved their missile batteries frequently, used decoys to confuse American radar,
Wow.
and coordinated their attacks to overwhelm the B-52's defenses.
It must have been terrifying for the American pilots,
Oh, absolutely.
flying into this storm of anti-aircraft fire,
Yeah,
knowing that they were facing a determined and capable enemy.
and it was effective.
Yeah.
The North Vietnamese shot down a significant number of B-52s during Operation Linebacker 2,
Really?
a fact that shocked the U.S. military and forced them to reconsider their tactics.
So how did the U.S. respond to these losses? Did they back down or double down on their bombing campaign?
Instead of rethinking their approach,
Okay.
the U.S. Air Force chose to escalate.
Wow.
They shifted to a strategy of overwhelming force,
Oh,
sending over 100 bombers at a time to saturate the North Vietnamese defenses.
wow.
They believed that sheer numbers would overcome the enemy's resistance.
But that meant even greater risk for the pilots like Captain Certain and even greater devastation for the people of Hanoi.
Yes, and it also raised serious ethical questions about the indiscriminate nature of the bombing.
Right.
Were military objectives being achieved at the expense of civilian lives?
And did this shift in strategy ultimately achieve its goals?
Well,
Did the bombing force North Vietnam back to the negotiating table?
that's where the historical debate gets interesting.
Great.
Just a few weeks after the bombing ended,
Yeah.
the Paris Peace Accords were signed,
Right.
officially ending America's direct involvement in the Vietnam War.
Okay.
But whether Operation Linebacker 2 was the decisive factor in bringing about peace is still debated today.
So was it a necessary show of force that achieved its objectives, or a brutal act of aggression that prolonged the suffering?
Some argue that the bombing broke the will of the North Vietnamese and forced them to make concessions they wouldn't have otherwise considered.
Right.
Others contend that North Vietnam was already on the path to a negotiated settlement, and that the bombing was a needless display of brutality that caused unnecessary death and destruction.
This raises some important questions about the use of force in international relations.
Absolutely.
Was Operation Linebacker 2 a justifiable act of war or a tragic example of military overreach?
It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
Yeah.
But what we can do is examine the evidence,
Right.
consider the different perspectives, and try to learn from the past,
Right.
understanding the motivations,
Okay.
the strategies, and the consequences of Operation Linebacker 2 can help us make more informed decisions about how to prevent future conflicts.
We've talked a lot about the military and political aspects of Operation Linebacker 2.
Right.
But what about the human stories?
Yes.
What happened to the people caught in the crossfire?
For the people of Hanoi,
Right.
the Christmas bombing was a terrifying ordeal. They endured night after night of air raids,
Wow.
huddled in shelters while bombs rained down around them.
Right.
Many lost their homes,
Yeah.
their loved ones,
Mhm.
and their sense of security.
And for the American airmen
Right.
flying those dangerous missions over Hanoi,
Yeah.
it must have been incredibly stressful.
Oh,
They
absolutely.
were risking their lives, facing enemy fire,
Right.
and witnessing the destruction they were inflicting.
The psychological toll on both sides was immense, and the scars of war,
Right.
both physical and emotional,
Yeah.
would linger long after the fighting stopped.
It's a stark reminder that war isn't just about abstract strategies and political maneuvering.
No.
It's about real people,
Absolutely.
real lives,
Yeah.
and real suffering.
And those stories deserve to be heard. We need to remember the human cost of conflict,
Right.
not just the statistics and the battle plans.
It's easy to get caught up in the big picture analysis,
Yeah.
but we have to remember that behind every decision, every bomb dropped, every casualty there are individual stories of courage, loss, and resilience.
Exactly.
Mm.
Operation Linebacker 2 wasn't just a series of air raids.
Yeah.
It was a human drama with lasting consequences for everyone involved.
So what can we listening today learn from this deep dive into Operation Linebacker 2?
Well,
What insights can we take away from this complex and controversial chapter of history?
I think there are several key takeaways.
Okay.
First, it's a reminder that war is never a simple solution.
Right.
It's a messy, brutal, and often unpredictable affair with unintended consequences that can ripple outward for generations.
We also see how important it is to consider multiple perspectives.
Absolutely.
We've heard from an American pilot and a North Vietnamese commander,
Right.
each with their own experiences and motivations. Understanding those different viewpoints can help us develop a more nuanced and empathetic understanding of the conflict.
And finally, I think it's a reminder that history isn't just something that happened in the past.
Right.
It's a living, breathing entity that continues to shape our present and our future. By studying events like Operation Linebacker 2, we can learn from the mistakes of those who came before us and hopefully find ways to build a more peaceful world.
That's a powerful thought to leave our listeners with.
Yeah,
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
we have.
From the harrowing account of a B-52 navigator to the strategic calculations of presidents and generals to the protests that erupted on the streets of America. And as we wrap up this deep dive into Operation Linebacker 2,
Right.
I'm left with a sense of awe at the resilience of the human spirit.
Yeah.
Both Captain Certain surviving that terrifying ordeal in the skies above Hanoi,
Right.
and the people on the ground enduring those relentless bombing raids, they all showed incredible strength and determination in the face of unimaginable circumstances.
It's a testament to the power of the human will to survive, to adapt, and to find hope, even in the darkest of times.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder that even in the midst of war, there are acts of kindness, compassion, and courage that shine through.
We've examined the military strategies, the political pressures, and the moral dilemmas, but ultimately, it's the human stories that resonate the most. The individual experiences of loss, fear, and hope that transcend the historical narratives.
And those stories often challenge our assumptions and force us to confront uncomfortable truths.
Right.
Operation Linebacker 2 wasn't just a military campaign.
Yeah.
It was a turning point in the Vietnam War
Okay.
that exposed the complexities of conflict and the enduring human cost of war.
This deep dive has certainly given me a lot to think about.
Yeah.
It's made me question the justifications for war, the consequences of military action, and the importance of seeking peaceful resolutions to international disputes.
And it's highlighted the importance of critical thinking,
Yeah.
of examining different perspectives, and of questioning the narratives we're presented with. History is rarely black and white.
Right.
And it's up to us to dig deeper, to challenge assumptions, like to seek a more nuanced understanding of the past.
I'm curious, as we conclude this deep dive, what stands out to you as the most significant takeaway from Operation Linebacker 2? What's the one thing you hope our listeners will remember from this episode?
For me, it's the importance of empathy.
Okay.
To truly understand the impact of war, we need to step outside our own perspectives and try to see the world through the eyes of those who live through it.
Right.
Whether it's a pilot facing enemy fire or a family huddled in a bomb shelter, their stories remind us that war is not an abstract concept. It's a human experience with profound and lasting consequences.
And those consequences continue to shape our world today.
Absolutely.
The lessons we learned from Operation Linebacker 2 can inform our understanding of current conflicts, the decisions our leaders make, and the importance of pursuing peace through diplomacy and understanding.
Exactly. History isn't just about the past.
Right.
It's about the present and the future.
Yeah.
By studying events like Operation Linebacker 2, we can hopefully gain the wisdom and foresight to create a more peaceful and just world for ourselves and for generations to come.
If this deep dive has sparked your interest in the Vietnam War and its impact, I encourage you to explore further.
Yeah.
Read the first-hand accounts, delve into the historical debates, and engage with the complexities of this pivotal moment in history. There's always more to learn, and understanding the past can help us shape a better future.
And remember, history isn't just about dates and battles.
Wow.
It's about people, choices, and consequences.
Yeah.
Keep asking questions, keep exploring, and keep learning.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Operation Linebacker 2.
Of course.
We hope you found it insightful and thought-provoking.
Yeah.
Don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into topics that matter. Until next time, keep exploring and keep learning.